checking. Checking is a skill that is used in Entry 3, Level 1 and Level 2. It will happen at least twice, normally 3 or more times in an exam paper, and it's a way of illustrating that you know how to double check that your sum is correct by using an alternative calculation. So I've got a Level 1 question on the board here that demonstrates how this can come across in an exam paper. So I'm just going to walk through the question and then I'll explain what you do. Magda works at a charity for homeless people. She needs to make lunch for 15 people. Magda knows this rule to find out the amount of rice she needs to cook. Number of people multiplied by 2, divide by 5, gives the cups of rice. So that's your flowchart, formula flowchart for Level 1. Magda thinks she needs to cook 10 cups of rice for 15 people. Is Magda correct? Show why you think this and show a check of your answer. I've completed the first part. I've extracted the fact that there are 15 people from the exam question, and below the flowchart I've written my calculation. We had 15 people, multiplied by 2 gave an answer of 30. I divided that 30 by 5, which gave me an answer of 6 cups of rice that are needed. So no, Magda is not correct. She does not need 10 cups of rice. Okay. So if you move on at that point, you would only actually get 3 out of 4 of the marks for the question, because you would have missed the fact that the last sentence I read in that question said, show a check of your answer. And this is the skill that we're going to run through now. As I mentioned earlier on, the skill that's being measured is your ability to check your calculation by using an alternative method. You can also do this through estimation, but I'll cover that in a different video. So for checking by inverse calculation, reverse calculation, you would pick one of the calculations that you've completed within that exam question. So for example, we could start with the 15 times 2 equals 30. So let's write that down. We did in the question, we did 15 times 2, and that gave us an answer of 30. Now, inverse in maths means the reverse process. So if you add, the inverse is subtract. If you subtract, it is add. If you times, it is divide. If it's divide, the inverse is multiply. So they're inverse from each other. On Level 2, you'll start getting on to looking at square numbers and square roots. They are inverse from each other, but let's keep it simpler for this example here. Okay, so the inverse, to do a reverse, means you start with a 30, you pick the inverse calculation to multiply, which is divide, and you could divide by any of those two numbers, but if we divide by 2, 30 divided by 2 is 15, so yes, my calculation was correct. Someone may have chosen to divide by 15 and got an answer of 2, and that would also have been correct. The key point, we've done a different calculation from our first calculation, and we've correctly used an inverse calculation and reversed that process. Okay, so let's give an example. For example, if we went shopping and we gave the shop assistant £20 and the item we were paying for was £16, and she gave us change of £4. A way of double checking whether we think she's got that right or not is if we took our £16 we had originally and add the change of £4, we do in fact get back to the £20 that we handed over in the first place. So that's an example of where we would naturally use checking in real life. Okay, so the key point here is identify a sum or a calculation that you've completed in your exam question, write that calculation out, identify the inverse operation, so the plus or minus inverse to each other, or multiplication and division, and then do a reverse calculation process in the box that's provided for you to do that question, and you'll get that mark, and that will give you typically 3 marks across the whole paper in most exams.